Okay, good morning. So this is our fourth class on studying the book, the sefer by Rav Yitzchak Ginzburg, Living in Divine Space, the 6 Duties of the Heart. And we're going to be reviewing today the second one. Last week was above the belief in the existence and the divine providence of God. Ein od milvado, there is only God. And this week it's going to be the sort of opposite energy, the opposite pole. It's going to be energy that's below, which is the negation of any other deities or powers, that there's only God. And actually, before we get into the body of that in the book, I'm going to pair this with another teaching by Rabbi Ginsburgh, which is a very short takeout of a series of 4 or maybe even 5 videos that he did about 2.5, 3 years ago when he was doing live broadcasts in Yerushalayim. And the whole series was the nature of truth. What is truth? And I'm just going to, from the third lecture of that, I'm going to do a takeout of definitions on what is truth according to the Torah. I did put that up on the in-gathering group, but again, if you're not on that and you would like that link, I will send it to you so you could watch the videos. They're all very amazing, all of them. I just chose the one that started with the concepts of Torah. The previous ones were the philosophies that preceded the concept of truth historically in the world. Didn't precede it, but explained it according to different philosophies. And this third video explains it according to Torah. So, this is what we're going to be looking at first. But let's just read what that, we said that each one of the 6 duties of the heart is paired with a verse from the Torah in order to ground it. So the first one, if you remember from last week, it would be good for us to just say that. The first one was, I am God, your God, who has taken you out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. And it's the belief only in God. There is nothing else but God. And the second one is, there is no other gods. The commandment is, you shall have no other gods before me. These are commandments to all of the Jewish people at all times. That's why they're called the 6 constant commandments. And you have an explanation in this book, Living in Divine Space, of how it is that when we observe and we immerse ourselves in those commandments, that we actually create an energetic divine space of awareness and of godly immersion around us. So above us was the divine providence and the existence in God, Ein od milvado. And below us is, you shall have no other gods before me. There's no other powers, there's no other deities. So people seem to be losing connections. We hope that they'll come back. And in a summary statement about that, you shall have no other deities or powers before me. It says, or the book says, by constantly eliminating any mixed loyalties or foreign allegiances. Let's just repeat that. By constantly eliminating any mixed loyalties or foreign allegiances, there is no other powers. We become whole and complete in our sincere commitment to God alone. Ein od milvado. That is where this chapter is going to head us in its explanation. And that being said, as I said at the beginning just now, I want to pair it with a teaching on what is the nature of truth, which seemed like a natural segue to me, in the sense that how would a person know how to avoid the barrage of seemingly powers and other things that one could attach to and ascribe possible power over our lives to? How would one make a distinguishment in that? And I thought the first thing is, we should really know what is truth according to the Torah. Once you have a very good working definition of truth, it becomes a lot easier to have that clarity about there is only God and there are no other powers in our lives. So we'll go back to the book in a moment, and we're just going to review this just outtake from the video by Rabbi Ginsburgh on the nature of truth that are called the 3 levels of truth according to Torah. So there are 3 levels that we're going to be talking about. The first one is called Sfat Emet. Sfat Emet. It's Sfat meaning the lips. So it's called in English the lip of truth, or it means the periphery of truth. Sfas Emes. It's that aspect which just touches upon truth. It's the borderline of truth. It's really touching truth. And this level is true. It's absolutely true. There's no question that this level called Sfas Emes, according to the Torah, is a true level, but it does not go into the depth and the essence of what is truth. So that's why it's called the periphery of truth, or the lip of truth. We're going to come back to defining these. First, we're just going to name them. That's the first level, and it's the lowest level. Okay, we'll find out in a minute why. Then there's Emet, truth itself. I am true to myself, how we really experience truth in the world, according to the definition of Torah. And then, interestingly enough, there is a third level that's called Emet La'amito, truth to truth's sake, truth that is a godly level of truth. This is what's called the level of absolute truth, meaning that it goes much deeper into what is truth than even truth itself. It's called absolute or true truth, and it's truth according to God's truth. So let's go back and review them. There's the first level, Sfas Emet, then Emet, truth, and then Emet La'amito, truth for truth's sake, or truth according to God's truth. Now, there are, in order for us to really understand this, there are 3 letters that comprise the Hebrew word for truth. There are just 3 letters in Hebrew, and if you want to write them down, it would be a good idea to be able to look at them. There's Aleph, there's Mem, and there's Taf. So there's the first letter of the Hebrew Aleph Beit. There's the last letter of the Hebrew Aleph Beit. The first letter is Aleph, the last letter is Taf. And there's the middle, or what's considered by Chazal, the sages, is the middle letter, which is Mem. Aleph, Mem, Taf. That spells the word Emet. And Rabbi Ginsburgh says that these 3 letters correspond to the 3 aspects of truth as Torah describes them that I just named. So let's just find out what the correspondence is. So the Aleph of Emet is going to be the highest level of truth. It's going to be Emet La'amito. It's going to be truth according to God's absolute truth. It's going to be that level of truth, the absolute truth. Truth Va'amito. Okay. And then there's going to be another level, which is the Mem. That was the Aleph of Emet, God's absolute truth, truth according to God's truth. Then there is the Mem, which is just truth, to be simply true. And that's the Mem of Emet. That's the middle level of truth. And then there is the most simplistic level of truth, which we're calling Sfas Emet, which is the lip of truth, the periphery of truth. And that's the Taf of Emet. So you have those 3 letters, but how it's spelled and how we pronounce it, Emet, it starts with the highest godly level. It goes to the level of souls, our level, the human level that we're working with in the world according to Torah. And then it goes to this other level, which is very fascinating, Sfas Emes. Let's describe them. First, you have to know something very fascinating, that the word Emet, Aleph, Mem, Taf, means to bring everything from the beginning through the middle to the end. I'll just repeat that. It means to bring everything, all that we encompass, everything we experience, truth, Emet, according to Torah in the Hebrew word, is meant to take and bring all from the beginning through the middle to the end. How do we know that? It's in the actual letters of the word Emet. Aleph is the beginning. Mem is considered the middle letter, not exactly the numerical middle letter, but according to the sages, it is considered the middle letter of the Aleph Beit, even though it's the 13th letter. And then Taf, which is the 22nd letter, is the final letter. So it means that because it has this ability to bring everything from the beginning to the end, a level of completion, right? That truth therefore has a quality of eternalness, eternal. And that is what it is. Truth is eternal. Just to pinpoint that, hold on one second. Let me go back to something actually a little while ago I wrote. This is from a Sikha of the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 5751. The Rebbe said, truth. The nature of truth is that it descends into and permeates all levels from the highest peaks to the lowest depths with consistent integrity. Now that's a simple, straightforward definition, but actually very deep. Let's repeat it. The nature of truth is that it descends into and permeates all levels of life, of experience, of creation, from the highest peaks to the lowest depths with consistent integrity. Truth is eternal. It does not change. It has consistent integrity. So that helps us understand that eternal part. So let's talk about what the three levels are so we can understand that. We're going to start with this lowest level, Sfas Emet, the level of the periphery of truth or the lip of truth. So what it means is, because we're talking about the lip of truth, it has to do with speaking, with communication, because that's what we do with our lips, right? With our mouth. So it means that a person speaks only truth, that the communication that comes through the lips of speech is communication that reflects only truth. It means I'm true to my word. That's what Sfas Emet means. I'm true to my word. So to explain this, therefore, it means, which is really quite phenomenal to consider the Torah definition, I always speak truth. I never deceive, I never lie, I never try and fool anybody. I'm always speaking truth. We can recognize that this is obviously a avoda, a level of work for all of us. And the way that we know that this is so, another way that it's reflected is actually in the teachings by Rabbi Akiva. He has famous teachings on the Aleph Beit. And he talks about the first letter, the Aleph, that what the Aleph means, how it's spelled out, Aleph, is it means emet lamed picha. Teach your mouth truth. Teach your mouth to speak truth. So Rabbi Akiva gave us a definition of what the very first letter of the Aleph Beit and also the first letter of our word of truth, emet, means. It means teach your mouth to speak truth. Now the Shalah, who's buried in Tiberias, and an ancient Torah scholar of the very highest degree, and the Alter Rebbe speaks about him very often in the Tanya, the Shalah. He said one of the most important things for a parent to do in educating their child is simply to teach the children to speak truth. So like a hallmark statement, a hallmark mission, right? To educate children to simply speak truth. Because once a child is educated to speak only and simply the truth, they will never deviate from that. It becomes part of their spiritual and psychological, emotional, intellectual DNA. They just learn to speak truth from a very young age, and that becomes how they speak. So therefore, it's very important, because holding true values and understanding what is true is crucial to us being able to distinguish a lot of things in life, almost many things in life. So the Shalos said that a parent educating a child should do this. It's one of the most primary things and one of the most important things that a parent can do for children is to teach them to speak the truth, so that the truth becomes a core part of our behavior. We who are either Balei Tshuvas or had different kinds of lives that included various kinds of learnings, may need to reteach that to ourselves. It's not simple, and it's not to be taken for granted that not all of us, even unknowingly, unconsciously, do that all the time. So we may need to relearn that, to speak the truth. And that's what this first aspect of the periphery of truth is. It's actually just to open your mouth and you speak truth. And of this, it says that it's the past and the present. Sfat emet is saying things about the past, which have already happened, so you know they're true or they're false. That's it, period, right? They're true or they're false. And it can also be in the present, something you're observing right now, the truth. Okay, so let's continue. That's the beginning of Sfas emes, the periphery or the lip of truth, is that I always speak the truth. It's about I'm being true to my word. Now, there is a second aspect to this, which is that you can actually, in Sfas emes, when you're looking at what does it mean to speak the truth and to be true about what I'm speaking, it's that what I promise or even what I imply, and it can even mean in thought, but certainly it means in speech. Either I promise or I imply a promise, right? It could be that I have to work on fulfilling that because it has to do with I'm true to my word. When I speak something, and even Rabbi Ginzburgh said to the level of thoughts, specifically of a righteous person, that we could apply that to ourselves as a goal. Even if I think, I imply I'm going to promise to myself, or I'm going to promise to others through my words or even through my thought, I'm going to do thus and so. So we have to work on fulfilling our promises. That's also the periphery of truth. It's not just that we speak truth, but we have to bring it to fruition in fulfilling our promises of what I speak in truth. So that's very interesting because that takes it to another level. That takes it to the level of not just practicing what I say, but that I fulfill what I say. I actually move into fulfilling what I say. And so therefore it represents, it's a very, even though it's like the lowest level, it's the periphery of truth, it's very strong. It's a very strong level of a definition of truth, right? I'm speaking the truth, my words are true, I'm true to my word, I'm practicing speaking truth, never deceiving or going away from those truths. And I'm also working on fulfilling the truths that I speak or that I imply from the lip of truth. So that's just the definition of the first level of truth, Sfas emes. Now we're going to come to the middle level, the one that we're more accustomed to, truth. Being true, just actually being true. That's the mem of the word truth. And it's being true to oneself. This level of truth means being true to yourself. It's self-reflective. The first one is truth out there in the world, how we speak truth, and it goes out into the world. The second one is being true to yourself. So what does that mean? This truth to myself, right? It means one should have no false pretenses, no deception about who I am. One should have no false conceptions, no deception, no self-covering about who I am really now. In other words, it should be true to myself, right? I have to be simple and true who I am now. I have to recognize that. That takes some work, right? Not to deceive myself in relationship to myself. This is something that happens to all of us often enough, right? That we might tend to deceive ourselves and create false images even in our own minds, or for the sake of something that is perhaps pressuring us or frightens us. And we don't get down to this bottom level of being true to myself, being true to oneself, which may be not the image, the golden image, it's just going to be a true image. So this takes practice. And that's why it says every night I should not only review my day, but I should review who I really am. Where are you? Where is your being? Where are you holding right now? And it reminds us of the story of after the Chet in Gan Eden, when it says God came strolling through the garden, and Adam and Chava, after the sin from the tree of knowledge, were hiding themselves. And Hashem says, Ayeka, Ayeka, where are you? Where are you holding? Who are you? Who do you perceive yourself to be right now? Let's be truthful, because only from there can you begin to grow again and work on tshuva and whatever else you need to work on. So there can't be, in this second level of truth, there can't be any self-pretense about oneself. There needs to be the work being done to really be accepting and kind to who we are. We're limited beings. Not everything is going to be perfect. Maybe nothing is going to be perfect about us, except that we're really trying very hard. And maybe, I'm sure we'll find some wonderful things in ourselves, but we need to review that. So we need to be true to oneself. Now, in the second level of emet, that corresponds to the mem, is that I also am working to fulfill something. So if it's about being true to myself, what would be the one thing I would want to fulfill about myself? Well, it would be my divine mission. What's my purpose in life? What is my godly purpose? And I would want to work on this inner level of dedication and through self-involvement, maybe even a little self-sacrifice, to fulfill my divine mission in life. And that would allow me to be true to myself, because every person has a sense of what they're meant to do according to what God gives them by divine providence. And since we want to be true to ourselves, it's going to involve fulfilling what our purpose is, what our divine purpose is, our divine mission. So that's this level of fulfillment. You notice that both of them had a level of fulfillment. First is the definition of what it is, and true to my word. This level that we're talking about, myself, is being true to oneself, who I really am. But both of them were fulfilling. And in this level, it's fulfilling what my godly given mission is, what my godly purpose is. So I'm going to work on that because I want to be true to myself. God created me to be a certain person, and I'm holding in a certain place right now. And to the best of my ability, from that true place where I'm holding, I'm going to try to tap into what it is that I need to do, right? So you might have a question and say, well, how do you know what your divine mission is? Many people have this question, and Rabbi Ginsburgh actually brings this question up. And he said, if you're not sure, and most people are really not sure what your divine mission is, so what you should do is you should tap into your God-given talents. We all have God-given talents. We usually actually can recognize those. And we should be able to tap into them and use them to actualize or realize our potential. And it's like fulfilling a promise to oneself. So if you don't have like this major heading of what's my divine mission, you can certainly tune into, you can certainly tap into what are my godly given talents? Who am I as a specific person that Hashem created, and that I'm able to do this and that and the other things. Some things I'm not so good at, but some things actually I'm pretty good at, and that's because that's how Hashem created me. Those are my God-given talents. And to be able to actualize and utilize that potential. So it was an interesting story when I was going through this about the Rebbe, that the Rebbe spoke about, what if there is a person who's very, very learned, and they're studying the depths of Torah, but they also happen to have a talent as a teacher. If that person in their learning just pursues the learning 24/7, or however many hours they're up, 27 or 10/7 or whatever, that they're just pursuing the learning and they're not teaching, then the Rebbe said they're not fulfilling the learning either. Now those are pretty strong words. Why? Because they have the potential to do more. God gifted them with the potential to not only learn, but to share and teach and spread that education to other people. And so therefore, one needs to actualize their divine potential. And that's the second level of being true to oneself. So you have really some very rich definitions of truth that we're operating from right now from the Torah. There's the last level, emet la'amito, which is a more elusive level, because we're talking about being true to God, the truth according to Hashem's truth. And again, one might ask, how would I know? How would I know what that is? You know, I'm just trying to cover the first two categories. Okay, that's fair. That's a fair question. So Rabbi Ginsburgh says that God presents himself to us through the Torah. And in fact, the Torah is called Torah Emet, the Torah of truth. So already we know that if we want to look for God, we need to look for God in the Torah. Because the Torah that God gave us and gave himself over in the Torah is called the Torah that is true. So therefore, I have to strive to keep and live by the words of the Torah and learn Torah. And that actually would be the way that I begin to tune into and consistently over time tune into the level of truth that's emet la'amito, truth to God's truth. Because God himself is in the Torah. It says God wrote himself into the Torah. He wrote his will into the Torah. And by us being attached to the Torah, to keeping the Torah, and to learning the Torah, and to keeping the mitzvot that the Torah says, and to studying the stories that the Torah tells us in order to learn lessons from. So then truthfully, it's the Torah and the mitzvot from the Torah that are helping us to tune into that very high level of truth called truth according to God's truth. Because these words of the Torah are Hashem's will. They're Hashem's ratzon. And that's what we need to tune into. So it's not as difficult as we might have thought initially. It's just really learning and keeping the Torah and keeping the mitzvot and working on that constantly. To be true to the words that you speak the truth, to be true to oneself, represent yourself truthfully to yourself, and therefore you will represent yourself truthfully to God. God sees who we are. We're limited beings. We're less than maybe what we imagine, but it's fine. It's just actually great to be true to who you really are at this moment, because from there you can grow and you can work. And then by learning Torah and immersing ourselves in the mitzvos and a Torah immersed lifestyle, we actually tune into this level that's called truth to Hashem's truth. So Rabbi Ginzburgh then asks an interesting question. He says, so does God have like a promise to himself, like we do? Right? We have a promise to fulfill our word, and we have a promise to do our godly mission and use our godly gifts and actualize them. So now we're talking about Hashem's truth. Does God have a promise to himself, so to speak, that he wants us somehow involved in? Well, in fact, yes, according to Rabbi Ginsburgh explaining it, he does. God does have a promise. And what is that promise? It's about making what's called in Hebrew a dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling place in this lowest world for godliness to manifest. This is God's desire. God's desire and will is that in all of the workings of creation and in all of our developmental stages of us being and becoming Am Yisrael, the nation that was chosen to be able to be the truth bearers, really, of God's Torah, that Hashem does have a desire, what's called a promise to himself, which is called to make this dwelling place in the lowest world, our world, for Hashem to dwell. So this is God's mission. This is, so to speak, God's promise to himself, a dir b'tachtonim. And Hashem, in fact, wants each of us to become conscious of fulfilling and assisting in God's desire. How? Well, we're the ones that are finite. We live in the finite world. That's where Hashem wants to find himself, indwelling in this finite world. But it happens through us. We become the channels of God's truth and God's will in the world by being true to God, true to ourselves, true to the Torah that we learn, and true to how we represent ourselves to ourselves and to the world. And by doing all of the Torah and the mitzvot and immersing ourselves and growing into that all the time, more and more and more, so we actually become the finite piece in the puzzle, so to speak, that actually brings Hashem the opportunity to, so to speak, fulfill his promise to himself, which is to make a dwelling place in this lowest world. And that's what we share. So Rabbi Ginsburgh suggests that I could always have in mind that I'm going to repeat that. I could always have in mind, this is me speaking to myself, right? It's a suggestion. I can always have in mind that I am here to make the world a dwelling place for God. In other words, keep that in mind. When you do everything you're doing, I am here, my purpose in being here, according to God's plan, is to make a dwelling place in the world for God. He says, is there another way to state this? Is there another way to understand this? Yes, there is. That everything that I do should be for the sake of sanctifying God's name. Now that is a beautiful phrase to take to heart and to hold on to like a precious jewel. To not only remind myself when I open my mouth to be like the students of Rabbi Akiva, the young children learning the Aleph Beit, to open my mouth and words of truth come out, right? It's to learn to speak the truth with my lips, with my mouth, and to be true to myself, not to put any umbrellas of deception or foolery around myself, but to be true to who I actually am right now. And that will assist me, honestly, in growing forward in my Torah mission and in what Hashem put me here to do. But also I could think that everything that I do, I should do for the sake of sanctifying God's name. And that's another way to think about creating a dwelling place for God. So now we learned, this is very in short, the whole lecture is over an hour. I encourage you to learn it. It's on inner.org's YouTube channel. All you do is go to the playlists and you look up the third one on truth, and that's what I'm taking this from, or you could watch all of them. And if you need a link, just write me a message and I'll send it to you again. So all of this was presented in order to begin to help us to clarify our belief that there is only God. Ein od milvado. So now we're going to go back to our regularly scheduled channel, which is Living in Divine Space. And we're going to pick up where we left off with that information as being a highlight to this. And we're going to go look at chapter 4, which is the second part. Let's put that screen share up just again for 1 second, which is the second part of Living in Divine Space. Last week we did above, belief in God's existence and providence. And now we're going to be doing below, not believing that there are other deities or gods. That's what we're going to be focusing on in our Living in Divine Space. So chapter 4 is called No Other. Below is the commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. That is actually the commandment. This commandment, the second commandment of the 10 commandments, is also the second one of the 6 constant commandments, or what we call the 6 duties of the heart, and clearly complements the previous one. You could see where in order to do one, you actually have to do the other. In order to have an absolute oneness and belief in there is only God's existence and divine providence, you have to eliminate everything that's false and sheker. You have to eliminate it. The second commandment states that we must not place our trust in any gods, any other gods, or any other powers. And you might think, well, that's kind of silly because there are no idols. You know, I don't live in a country where there's idols, and I don't have idols in my house. I'm not involved with idols. So I'm doing okay, but there are subtleties, especially in today's society, that are, you'll see, problematic and are challenges to all of us in terms of attributing anything to other than God, power other than God. Let's continue. This prohibition of you shall have no other gods before me includes believing that anything other than the one God is ultimately responsible for what happens in the world. There's a simple, straightforward definition. This prohibition includes believing that anything other than the one God is ultimately responsible for what happens or what is happening in the world. And there's a lot happening in the world. It's all from God. We have to really be clear about that. If, for example, we do not recognize or acknowledge God as being the ultimate and only source of our livelihood, what's called parnasa, but imagine that we receive our livelihood solely from the hands and good graces of others, like in our corporation or our business, thus making ourselves psychologically dependent upon others. So this is a subtle form of worshiping idols, according to the definition of the Torah. Likewise, if we attribute our achievements or our accomplishments, working on a small project, a big project, anything we're doing, we're doing a mitzvah. When we get to the end of the mitzvah, we somehow have a lot of self-satisfaction and we attribute it to, great, I did that mitzvah. Well, oops, you missed a little subtle cue there. At the end of the mitzvah, we need to turn that around and say, for the grace of God, and acknowledge God, you helped me do that. I was your channel to produce that mitzvah in a finite world, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity. And I hope that I did what Hashem needed me to do, but it was all you. It was only God. So that's a very high form of acknowledgement, but that acknowledgement in our accomplishments is exactly what points us back to God. If we would have any self-satisfaction or point towards ourselves and what we accomplish and attribute in life solely to our own talents or prowess, this is a subtle form of self-worship. Also a problem, like idol worship. Moreover, this commandment implies that we should not imagine that there is an ultimate reality in which we experience what's called cause and effect, worldly causations. True that God created nature, Mother Nature, with its laws and its cause and effects dynamics, but God controls every moment. Every single thing that happens is divine providence. This is probably the most subtle aspect of us being seemingly the veil pulled before our eyes, a little bit puzzling. We see something in nature, a sunset, a flock of birds flying in the sky, a flower growing from a bud into a full bloom, gigantic rose. We see these things and we think, isn't that amazing what nature does, what nature produces? At that moment, we have to take a deep breath, step back and realize that it's what Sarah Edith Schneider, my dear friend, always says. It's the hand of God in the glove of nature. Does the glove move by itself? Absolutely not. It's the hand inside the glove that causes nature to move, right? So everything that happens in nature, from a small seed sprouting to a huge tree growing full of pomegranates or dates, to a tsunami or an earthquake in some part of the world, or a hailstorm, or to a baby being born. Everything you can think of in creation that ongoingly happens in the world is attributed only to God. Only to God. Nature is there as a concealment of God, Elohim, but it doesn't mean that God is not controlling and operating nature. So that's a level of subtle clarity that we need to have when we're working on this second duty of the heart, which is to have no other powers, to not attribute anything other than only to God. We must therefore neither look to the forces of nature nor any created being or entity for what we want, nor feel gratitude them for what we have. So it includes more than just recognizing and acknowledging God. It includes attributing what we are dependent upon God. And this may be hard for some people, but it happens to be one of those Torah axioms of truth, that one of the things we have to learn is we are completely dependent upon God. For waking up this morning, for our every breath of life, for everything that we choose to do, for every thought. And yes, there is free choice. God creates that for us in order for us to do what we said before, make that dwelling place for godliness in the world, in the finite world. But even in the midst of that, there's this living paradox that we always have to be aware. It's all God. There's only God operating here. And I am merely a channel for the illumination of godliness in the world to the best of my ability. So we have to have that acknowledgement, and we have to have that gratitude towards God, that we are dependent upon God and that everything that we're gifted is indeed from God. With regard to other people, we may feel and we may express our gratitude for the good that they bestow upon us. We should say thank you. We receive a lot of goodness from other people in our lives, in Hashgacha Pratis on a daily basis. People do very nice things, to help us. And that's wonderful. And so we should say thank you. And that's because human souls possess a free will and they can choose whether to be giving people. But we do not attribute the power to them. We just express gratitude and thank you. The power, just like what happens through me is from God, also what's happening through them is also coming from God, right? And it says particularly, one of the commandments, interesting enough, is honor your father and your mother, who act as partners with God in creating and caring for us. So to them, you have to give a lot of kavod, but you still need to recognize that it's with the acknowledgement of God as being the creator in having that be happened. So I have a little thing here. It says, see a note. So we're going to go to that note. I'll give you a moment to find it. Okay, so we were talking about with regard to honoring your father and your mother. It says regarding, this is a note in chapter 4 on that comment, the numerical value of the first word of the fifth commandment, honor your father and your mother, is 26, the value of God's essential name. So honor your father and mother actually has the same numerical equivalent of God's transcendental name, Havaya, 26. This teaches us that in honoring our parents, we are indeed honoring God. For he has chosen our parents to be partner with him in creating us. So even inside the commandment, there is a reference back to God telling us it's really God who's giving us these parents, and through the parents I've been created and been raised, and it's also honoring God. So that's a beautiful little note on the fifth of commandments of the 10 commandments, honor your father and your mother. Okay, the commandment that we're looking at, which is you shall have no other gods, no other deities, no other powers, no other allegiances or foreign loyalties to anything, only to God, is placed in the living in divine space we create below us. It's because for there to be a rectified level below us, it means for us to recognize that only God is supporting me. Only God is below me, beneath me, literally holding me up and supporting me. God supports us, and ultimately, we have no one to rely upon besides God. All natural or seemingly supernatural earthly forces are not worthy of any trust or any acknowledgement. It's only God supporting us. So that's why it's placed below. It's for us to recognize that and to be able to take that information in. And as we said before, that the path of life, this godly path of life of the 6 duties of the heart, this creating this divine space around us, is that when we work, and it's daily work, that's really what the Tanya is telling us, it's daily work, by constantly eliminating any mixed loyalties or foreign allegiances, we become whole and complete in our sincere commitment to God alone. Ein od milvado. There is nothing but God. And we're meant to give thanksgiving and acknowledgement to God and recognize that there is only God. There's nothing else. And God is the true existence and the true providence of all of creation for all time. And then when we do that, we can walk on the path of godly life in this lower plane that we call the earthly existence. So that is the second in terms of the duties of the heart. And I hope that it was helpful in learning that beginning segue on truth, so that if we ever sort of wonder, well, what's happening around me and where is the power of this situation that's happening in this other country, coming from? So we have to recognize that the truth is that there is only God. There is only God. So that's a very important aspect of that level of truth on all levels, that we should be true to our word, speak words of truth. We should be true to ourselves, perceive ourselves as accurately as possible, and represent ourselves before God and before anything outward in the world as being who we are, just who we are right now, limited, whatever our limitations are. Just be true to ourselves, and being true to ourselves, we're able to grow and expand in godly ways, and to be true to God, which really means to immerse ourselves in the truth of God's will, which is the Torah Emet. So on that note, we're going to finish with chapter 4 of the duties of our heart today, living in divine space.